Welcome to the Ready Room Podcast.
Hello.
I'm your host, Josh.
And I am Caroline.
The co-host. The late
I'm
co-host.
sorry.
Just couldn't wait to use the restroom. Just had to wait until
I had to take a nap.
right before the podcast. Today we talk about hammer-fired handguns versus striker-fired handguns. But before we start, I would like to mention that if you are watching on YouTube, please subscribe. Please comment if you have any fun episode ideas. Share with your friends if you don't mind. It really helps us out a lot. And I hate to say this part, the whole smash the like button.
Smash that like button.
Read shit. No, I'm not going to do that. Get copyrighted. But it really would help us out. If you're listening on any of the podcast sites such as Spotify, Amazon, Stitcher, Google, not yet on Apple, unfortunately, leave a review where possible. Like I said, I'm not entirely sure which ones let you leave a review. I know Spotify does not. Amazon does. I believe Google does. I don't know about Stitcher. Never used it before, to be honest with you. But anyways, today's episode, which I mentioned was hammer-fired handguns versus striker-fired handguns, was actually planned a while back. When I first started writing up the first 20 episode ideas, I had already planned for the hammer-fired versus striker-fired. But recently, I visited a local shop, let's say, and there's a guy that works there named Jared, who's actually a fan of the podcast. Very nice guy, very smart guy, for liking the podcast and for other reasons. You're allowed to be smart for more than one reason. Mm-hmm. I see you judging me.
I'm not. I'm just very cold.
Very cold. She's a pansy. We are in a basement. Anyways, he actually asked, when are you going to do a hammer-fired versus striker-fired? And I was like, you know what? Appreciate you listening. So look, I went ahead and bumped up the schedule to the 1 month anniversary of us starting this. It's been almost a month. This is episode 4. So 4 weeks as of today.
Yeah.
So it is a month. I don't know if it's technically a month. Because January is not over yet. But it is our 4th episode. And so shout out to Jared. I will not say where he works, what his last name is. I'm not going to dox him. But he's a very nice guy, and I really appreciate him watching and listening to the podcast. Second note, we have a new mixer to try out loaned to us by our awesome pastor. Shout out to Pastor Mark.
Pastor Mark.
We've been having some audio issues. A lot of you know that we've been having to fiddle with our gain a good bit on these mics. And I don't like having the gain so high, but for the live stream, the volume is just too low from our voices.
So it's good now.
Well, that's good. It has been too low. So we're going to try this other mixer to try and bring the gain down but keep the audio level high. If you're listening on the podcast websites, it hasn't been as much of an issue because through the editing software, I can jack up the volume. But for the live streams, it's too quiet. And I don't like having the gain so high so it picks up breathing and lip movements, etc. So hopefully on the next podcast, we'll be using that mixer to test it out and see if we get some better audio quality out of that one. Anyways, that's all the things I have to go through, I think. Do you need to go through anything?
Nope.
No? Oh, social media.
Yes.
Check TBR Gunworks out on Instagram.
And
Facebook, actually. TBR Gunworks is now on Facebook. Instagram, it's all just straight up TBR Gunworks. I mean, there's an underscore on Instagram, but if you just search TBR space Gunworks, it pulls up.
Yeah, and just the interwebs. TBRgunworks.com.
TBRgunworks.com. I'm going to find a way to link the podcast to the website. I got to find out how to do it.
Yeah. Because
I am a tech monkey. Like, I'm not good at it. I don't know if that's actually a term, like grease monkey, but I am terrible at technology. I'm great with guns, great with like car motors. Like, I can do cool things, just not if it's electric. If it has power running through it.
It's electric.
Boogie, woogie, woogie. No, okay, that doesn't count though because batteries and alternators. That's electric. I can do those.
Can you fix them though, or do you just know that they exist?
I can replace an alternator. I can't fix it. All right. So, Caroline, what is your concealed carry handgun?
It is a Smith & Wesson M&P Shield Performance Center.
Yep, the Performance Center Edition, 9mm. I really like the Performance Center Edition over the standard because the trigger is just
fantastic. Way
better than now. The second gens, I know guys are better, but the first gens were just awful. The first gen stock triggers were just absolutely terrible. We should make a someone just commented saying you need a foam board with your details on it. We should make one.
We're in the process of that.
Yeah, I wanted to print something up, but we're out of ink. But anyways, the second gen triggers are better, but the first gen triggers of the Smith & Wesson M&Ps are crap. So the Performance Center edition really helps it out. But that's a striker-fired handgun, right? And today, for the first time, if you're watching the podcast and not listening to it, we actually have a couple visual aids here. I'm not going to fiddle with them because there's a super high chance of one of them falling over right now. They're just kind of barely resting there. All three handguns are unloaded, if you can see them. If you can't see them, one on the far left, or no, I'm sorry, in the center is the 6 Hour Emperor Scorpion 1911, a single action only hammer-fired handgun. On the far left is an H&K.
So what does single action mean?
Well, we're going to get to that.
Okay.
I'm preluding. I specified single action.
Okay.
Because on the far left is the H&K USP 9mm compact, which is single action and double action hammer-fired. On the far right is my carry gun, which is a CZP-10C, which is a striker-fired handgun. So, striker-fired handguns have no external hammer. They operate through the trigger only having to basically move a safety out of the way and let the firing pin drop. Now, that's a very basic explanation. We're going to get into some further details in a minute.
We should get some TBR chamber flags.
That'd be kind of cute.
That'd be really cool.
So single action, double action, or just in general hammer-fired handguns. Single action means the trigger only has to do one job, which is to drop the hammer. Double action meaning it does two jobs, pulling the hammer back and then releasing the hammer so the hammer can hit the firing pin. But before we get too far into the details of what splits these two and the differences, I want to go into a quick history brief, which I love history.
I'm pregnant.
She's just yawning like crazy. Just no professionalism whatsoever
I'm
with
so
this girl.
sorry.
I don't know why I was like, oh, it'd be great to have your pregnant wife as a co-host.
That's your mistake.
I love history, so I wanted to go into a very, very brief historical explanation here. The first ever semi-automatic pistol in general that I could find through my research, I'm sure someone's going to be like, actually, but from what I could find, it was the Salvatore Dormus. Am I saying that right? Salvatore Dormus?
Looks right. I don't know. I only speak English.
That's true. I speak a little bit of nothing. English being like my half first language. Yeah. Patented, the Salvatore Dormus pistol was patented July 11th, 1891. So, pre-1900, the existence of semi-automatic handguns was there. But the first mass-produced semi-automatic handgun, which a lot of people already know, because it's touted as this all the time, was the C96 Mauser broom handle from 1896. Still pre-1900, but 5 years after, the Salvatore Dormus. I need to look more into that gun because that sounds fun. I did a very brief, delve into what it was. It seemed.
Why was it called the broom handle? Is it just long?
No. The pistol grip was this wooden-looking broom handle looking.
Oh, it just looked
grip.
like a broom.
Yeah,
handle.
it was this really round little grip. Loaded from the top, the C96 was extremely popular for its time. It was widely produced. It was accepted by a couple places, and it was produced in I think genuinely produced in 4 calibers. However, there are some other models that were prototyped and tested in certain countries for different calibers. I think 2 different countries tried them in 45 ACP. Mm-hmm. As far as I can remember, I didn't want to go too deep in the history, but I don't know, I love it. I know. No, I'm not going to get into that. I was going to go into something totally different, and it's not. It's not relevant to the conversation.
The spiral.
But after the broom handle, what really boomed the semi-automatic handgun development and the technological advancements for semi-auto handguns was the 1911 by John Moses Browning. Just a wonderful human being. Just should be thanked every day for everything he did for handguns and firearms. John Moses Browning, we love you. So, the 1911, as I mentioned earlier, single action only, hammer-fired handgun. But what was interesting about it was it had a new short recoil tilting barrel action design that completely changed the future of handguns, because I say almost, but most modern handguns use the same action type that the 1911 uses. The barrel tilts.
So that's just when the slide comes back and the
Exactly.
barrel comes up. Okay.
Exactly. So to new users,
That's what I was thinking, because I had never heard that before. That's what I was thinking it was, but I was going to ask when you got done with your sentence.
Yep,
but.
no, you're 100% right. To new firearm users who don't exactly know what that means, if you've ever pulled the slide back on, I'd say like 80% of modern handguns, 90% more likely.
I've never seen one that doesn't do it.
Yeah, there are a few, but
I mean, I'm sure there are, but like, I haven't seen one.
the barrel will tilt up as the slide comes back, and that's actually part of the action. It's part of the way the firearm cycles and functions. That design, despite the fact that the 1911 is admittedly outdated now, it's a single action only 7 to 8 round, 45. The design itself is fantastic, and it's still being used. Guns like the CZ75, the Glock, almost all H&K handguns, and like I said, most other modern handguns use that tilting barrel short recoil action. So that was a huge change. It was one of the first, this was the first real big game changer. A lot of people will say it was the Mauser broom handle. I disagree. I think the Mauser broom handle was like the first significant step in the right direction, and then this thing just boomed technology forever.
So what is the tilting barrel? Like, what exactly does it do?
So it's the way the firearm locks up. So if you look at all three of those firearms over there, the exposed part of the barrel that you see through the slide, which is the chamber, has the cartridge caliber written on it. That's how the gun locks up. That chamber locks into the top of the slide. And then when it functions, as the slide starts moving backwards, it tilts the barrel, unlocking the firearm. So the barrel tilts down more towards your end versus the muzzle end, tilts up on the muzzle end, and it unlocks the slide, allowing it to cycle backwards. And as it cycles backwards, you extract, and then eject the spent casing. When it reaches the end of its travel, it goes forward again through the use of a recoil spring. And then as it goes forward, picks up a new round, chambers it, and then when it fully seats forward, the barrel finishes locking back upwards. And that's a full cycle of the handgun. So that's the locking mechanism.
It really just kind of helps the slide.
It's not helping the slide. So what it is it's every firearm needs a locking mechanism to function. With bolt actions, you see it as locking lugs on the side of the bolt, that when you turn the bolt, you can no longer just pull the bolt straight out.
Right.
It's locked in there unless you open it up vertically. For handguns, they need the same thing, but it's not something. I mean, you can always pull the slide back.
Yeah.
But that's because you're pulling backwards in the direction it's supposed to go to unlock.
So it won't just like fall backwards.
Exactly.
Okay. Yeah. Gotcha.
Exactly. It's a way to lock the gun and fully have the firearm in battery. We say, meaning that it is locked up and it nothing's semi-open. Like if it's not all the way into battery, and it somehow fires, you have an exposed. How do I put this? You have the chance for gases to expand in their incorrect direction. You want them to expand forward in the safe direction where you're firing versus out of the breech, out of the chamber in a dangerous direction. And gases will always take the path of least resistance. So a locking mechanism is critical for the firearm to be safe and functional, and that's honestly the best design we've had yet. Now, there are new designs. I understand that some of you guys are like shouting the Largo. Is it Largo or Lago Alien? I don't remember the pronunciation at this moment. But that's new. It's not exactly the most tested firearm in the world, as in like service life. So we'll see how that design goes in the future. But right now, I really wanted this episode to be really easy to consume as a new firearm user. The past 3 episodes we've done have been not too in-depth, but they still aren't one of those episodes that are super easy for a new firearm user to consume. And I wanted this podcast to be good for both experts and new users. So I really want to make sure I made this episode really simple. But good question, because I didn't even think to...
I honestly didn't even know.
Yeah, I didn't even think to explain what a locking mechanism is. It's one of those things where I just gloss over that. So that was a good question. So we know that, back to what we were saying was a 1911, the tilting barrel, short recoil action changed the future of handguns. Well, around 1970, we see the first ever striker-fired handgun, which is the H&K VP70. Horrible, horrible gun. It worked, right? But it it had one of the worst triggers. It's a long, very long double action only trigger. So striker fired guns that you see now, they're in fact single action only. All the trigger has to do is move a safety out of the way. On some firearms, that trigger moves a safety out of the way while putting more tension on the spring. But all in all it has to do is move something out of the way so the spring-loaded firing pin can move forward and strike the primer of the cartridge. So it's not doing both. It's not doing the first action, which would be pulling the striker back and then releasing it. Like I said, some guns do have a partial where it puts a little tension on the spring on the firing pin in the rearward direction before it lets it forward, but it's mostly a single action only. This VP70
would that be considered double action? If it's just
you could make an argument that if it puts any tension on the firing pin spring rearward a little bit, that it's maybe double action.
But it's still like labeled single action.
Yeah, but in reality, in fact, most people won't label a striker fired handgun single action, which is really, really weird. You'll ask. I've actually asked someone, but way back in the day, it was this weird striker fired handgun I was looking at. It had a really awful trigger. It was just really weird. I don't remember what it was at all. Some off-brand gun. And I was like, man, is this thing double action? Because the trigger was so bad. He's like, it's a striker. It's not double or single action. I was like, well, you're just wrong. Like, a striker-fired gun can be single action or double action, but people have this weird thing where, like, it's not a hammer. You can't call it DA or SA. But they're mostly single action. If we get to the bare bones of it, they're single action. It pretty much just releases the firing pin to go forward. The VP70 was a double action, and I have to think that this was just because of the fact that it was the very first striker-fired handgun of its time. It was also the first polymer-framed handgun. We had seen polymer-framed rifles before, but never a polymer-framed handgun. So it actually beat Glock by 12 years. Yep. Suck it, Glock. I can't stop. I can't stop myself from saying negative things.
We're just going to get like a negative sponsorship.
Yeah, Glock's going to pay us to shut up.
Yeah.
That'd be great, actually. I'd take the money for the first month and then just break the contract and immediately start ragging on them. The Glock is a good handgun. Don't get me wrong, guys. It's just jokes. And we'll do a Glock episode one day. So anyways, the gun's not very popular, like, for use. Like, nobody wants to just go out there and shoot a VP70 on a super regular basis or use it in service. However,
Glock was still making Tupperware then.
Glock was... I forgot about that.
I didn't even know they made Tupperware.
So...
You gonna be all right?
Yeah, I'm good. So the VP70 is very well liked by collectors. They want to get their hands on it, but never really a service handgun. So now there are plenty of striker-fired handguns in the market, and in fact, it's become basically the standard. I say basically because there's an argument to be made in either direction, but I mean, you're seeing way more striker-fired handguns getting adopted right now. The Glocks were used by special forces for a while. Certain special forces groups, by the way, guys. I know some guys were using SIG 226s. Some groups were using 1911A1s or the new Colt model of the 1911A1. Can you stop cracking your knuckles?
I'm sorry.
A lot of gain on these mics, girl. Picking everything up. So I know, like I said, I know that different special forces groups use different things, but there have been lots of striker-fired handguns in use, and now the U.S. military has adopted the SIG P320. I know Glock was very upset about that one. Pretty funny. But Glock's Smith & Wesson M&P CZ P10 series, the HK VP9 series, the 320 series from SIG, the Walther P99 and PPQs. There are tons of striker-fired handguns in the market. They're very common. 10 years ago, your average FUD would be like, you can't trust them plastic guns. They break. They just gonna break. FUDs being FUDs. But the CZ P10C on the far right over there has in fact been run over by my 2500 Cummins pickup truck. It is not broken, not even a crack in it. There's some scratches from the pavement.
Not even that many though.
No, it was run over in my driveway. That's a fun story for another time. Someone in this room is at fault.
Look.
And it's not me.
I set it on the tire and I forgot about it. Okay.
Responsible gun ownership here, guys. Safe.
Also done that with coffee mugs with my car. So
It's a funny story, but we'll do that on a different day. Either way, polymer framed handguns are in fact pretty durable nowadays. The polymer blends they use are tough, and I can personally attest to that CZ P10C's physical durability, and I'm very happy with it. Let's see. There are still plenty of popular hammer-fired handguns in use today. The 1911s are still in use in some places. The 2011, which is a double-stack 9mm variant of the 1911, is really popular for competition use. Before I go any further, a double-stack magazine means that there's
I didn't think about that.
staggered 2 stacks of staggered ammunition in the magazine. So a single stack 1911 holds 7 to 8 rounds because it's a very thin magazine with 1 column of ammunition in there. Double stack, they're staggered left, right. Usually always increases your capacity, sometimes by twice as much.
They're just a little bit wider.
A little bit wider, a good bit wider, but yeah.
Yeah.
And then you have SIG talking about they refuse to call it a double stack. They call it a stack and a half.
I mean,
It's a double stack.
It kind of is a stack and a half.
But it's a double stack.
Yeah.
Like the 365, they called it a stack and a half for a while. I was like, no, it's a double stack. It's just thinner.
Yeah.
And you're stacking less. Like, don't get me wrong, it's not as wide and you can't exactly fit as much ammo. Anyways, moving on. Nitpicking here. The CZ75 series is still extremely popular. Some countries still use it. There's the CZ75. There's so many models of the CZ75. But then you have like the CZ Shadow 2 series. It's really popular for competition. The FNX series, the 45 Tactical, is extremely popular. Terrible trigger. The SIG 226 is still always very popular. And the H&K P30 is very popular as well. You know, the John Wick movies really boomed that one. Really made that one extremely popular. So you have 2 very clear options, right? You have hammer fired, you have striker fired, and both have extremely viable and trustworthy options. It really comes down to, features and price, reliability, because some can be proven to be more or less reliable. That takes your own research. I will not. I can't even say that. Who can tell what I'll do on this thing? Because I'm like a, what do you call it when you sell yourself for that product? What do you call it?
Spokesman?
I'm not a spokesman. I'm not paid by anyone, but like I would literally sit here for an hour and talk about why I carry that P10C.
Well, yeah, that's true.
So
You've
it's
done
like
it.
shilling. I'm thinking of shilling. Like you're shilling out for something?
Oh, yeah.
It's not shilling. I don't get paid. I just won't lie to you. If I don't like something, I don't like it, and I'll tell you why I don't like it. If I do, well, there it is. All right, so mechanical differences. We'll get into some mechanical differences. I didn't want to go too in-depth with this one because, like I said, I wanted this to be a very easy to consume episode for a new firearms user. So I really kept it bare bones, right? The least you need to know. So for hammer-fired handguns, most of the time you have an external hammer on the outside of the gun. Some exceptions use an internal hammer, which is really an interesting choice. Why not just make it striker-fired if you're going to put the hammer inside? It could be cheaper. I don't know. But most of the time, external hammer. The external hammer has to strike the firing pin, which will then move forward. Sometimes it's kept rearward by spring tension, and then it gets pushed forward by the hammer striking it. Sometimes there are free float firing pin in like just free floating in there with no pressure on it. So when when the slide moves forward and the chamber or the cartridge locks into the chamber, the firing pin is there's no force to have it strike anything until it's hit by the firing pin. Some use a weird spacer in between the firing pin and the hammer that is like a buffer. There's all kinds of different designs, but external hammer or internal hammer strikes the firing pin strikes the primer, gun go boom. Okay, very simple. There are double action handguns that are double action and single action, and we'll get into why it's both in a second. And then there are single action only handguns. 1911, for example, single action only. When you pull the trigger, the hammer drops. If the gun doesn't go boom, let's say it's empty, let's say you're just dry firing, you can't pull the trigger again and make the hammer go back and then forward. It only does one thing. It drops the hammer. Single action only. Double action and single action handguns means that if you were to...
Do we have anything that's...
We do. That HK right there is double action and single action.
Okay, because I could have swore that we had one that was both.
I think that's the only one we have that's DASA.
I think so.
We have a lot of striker guns, and I love 1911s, but the HK USP is the only handgun we have that's double action, single action, hence why it's here. If the handgun is unloaded, it is uncocked, it's just sitting there in a safe and empty position, and you pull the trigger, safety off, it will pull the hammer back and then drop it. If it's loaded and it goes off when you do that double action pull, where you're pulling it back as the first action and then dropping it as a second action, all in one trigger pull, and the gun goes bang, the firearm will cycle, the slide will move rearward, spent casing gets ejected.
That'll push the hammer back.
It'll push the hammer back, and the gun then goes into single action mode because all it has to do is drop the hammer. Mm-hmm. And it will do that for the rest of the magazine unless you get a malfunction or whatever. But even then, if you're clearing the malfunction, moving the slide back, it'll recock the hammer into a single action position. So I'll get into pros and cons of that later because I actually wrote some things about that. But double action, single action means that it does both. The first round, if the hammer is down, will be double action. Everything after that is single action. So I really want to talk about pros and cons of that, but I have to wait until we get to that section. We're just talking about mechanical differences. Some models, like this H&K USP over here, have a safety that it also operates as a decocker. So if I put a loaded magazine in the gun and I chamber around, pull the slide back, let it forward, and have a live round in the chamber, the hammer is cocked back.
We've got an internal hammer, right?
No, it's like half hidden.
Okay.
It's external. When it's cocked, you can see it, and right now you can see it.
It's been so long since I've shot that.
It only sticks out a little bit when it's down. Gotcha. Very, very little bit. Like it's barely enough to get your thumb on. What was I saying? Oh,
sorry.
You're fine. If I put a loaded magazine into that H&K, chamber around, I have two options. Well, three really, but two. I can put the safety on and leave it in single action mode only, or I can push the safety down instead of up, and it will decock the firearm. It will drop the hammer like 90% of the way. It actually puts a hammer block safety in the way of the firing pin. So the hammer drops. It's terrifying. Every time you do it, you're like, this is the time the safety's going to fail.
Yeah, that makes me nervous.
Every time, even if I'm at a range and I'm pointing it down range and I decock it, it's terrifying every single time.
Like, I'd much rather push the hammer forward.
Right.
By myself.
We'll pull the trigger and
and just push it down.
That's what a lot of people do in 1911s. But so you're decocking the gun. It's still live.
Yeah.
It just goes into double action mode, right? Some guns have that decocker separate from the safety. I know some SIG models did that where they had a safety separate from a decocker, but it's the same function. Mm-hmm. It drops the hammer into double action mode. Then you can put the safety on if you want, and have it on safe and double action mode, or you can use that double action as a safety. But like I said, we'll talk about that a little more in the future because I want to try to stay on topic, even though I seem to not be able to. Mm-hmm. Okay. Some handguns have a safety. Nope, I already went over that. Dang it! I got distracted by you and my own conversation. Handguns like the 1911. There we go. Mm-hmm. Sorry, I was finding my way back there. The 1911 has to be carried one of two ways. You can either do the correct way, which is to chamber around, hammer's cocked, and then put the safety on, and you carry it cocked and locked.
Yeah.
Okay. It's chambered, the hammer's back, safety's on. If you had to pull the handgun, you pull it out, safety off, and then it's in single action mode only because it's only a single action handgun. The second way, which is the wrong way, is to just put a loaded magazine in there and have the chamber empty and have to pull the slide back when you pull it.
Yeah.
Which is
because not only do you have to take the safety off, I mean, if you have the safety on at that point.
The safety will not go on a 1911 if it's not chambered or if the hammer's not cocked back. Yeah.
I did not know that.
Yep.
Okay, well, in that case,
yep.
More steps.
Yep, you just got to pull it
then chamber around. You can pull the safety as you're pulling it out.
Yeah, if you have one in the chamber,
Yeah.
one of the ways you would train is to pull the handgun out, safety off before you ever reach presentation. Once again, we'll get to that in a little bit. That's more into the pros and cons of everything. So that's the basics of the hammer-fired handguns. The striker-fired handguns have an internal spring-loaded firing pin that is held back by, most of the time, once again, I know some designs differ, and you can nitpick all you want, but generally it's a internal spring-loaded firing pin that is held back by sometimes it's called a striker safety, sometimes it's called a firing pin lug safety. I mean, it's just the safety that goes up and down that blocks the firing pin from moving forward. And when you pull the trigger in a way of happening, because it's not just a direct bar, sometimes it's a couple different bars and springs and all that fun stuff, it pushes up on that safety, and it clears the path for the striker to move forward because it's under constant spring tension. And then once it hits the primer and the round goes off and the slide moves rearward, there's I don't want to get too deep into what's that safety mechanism called? I'm blanking out here. I don't want to get too deep in disconnectors. There we go. I don't want to get too deep into what a disconnector is.
I didn't know what word you were searching for.
I know. That's why I didn't ask. I was like, man, I'm on my own here. I didn't want to get too deep into what a disconnector is, but what happens is the slide moves rearward, firing pin gets compressed again under that spring tension, and that safety goes back into its path. Once you let go of the trigger, it resets, et cetera, et cetera. The same thing happens with a hammer-fired gun, by the way. It still has a disconnector, and it has to reset the trigger. Anyways, man, I can't stop. I can't stop myself from just wanting to go down these rabbit holes of details.
I understand.
But so, anyways, they're single action only. Pushes the safety out of the way. Firing pin does the rest. They do not have follow-up shot capabilities, and this is something that people like to tout the double action handguns for. Is, well, if the gun doesn't go boom, you can just pull the trigger again. That doesn't make any sense because you should be clearing malfunctions, not trying to keep firing the malfunction. But
what's it called when rounds get stuck?
Like a hang fire or a squib.
The squib.
A squib is when you hit the primer and the primer ignites, but the powder doesn't.
Are we thinking about something else? Because I've showed you a thing before where there's like rounds stuck in the barrel.
Yeah, it's squib.
Okay.
So the primer's enough force to push the bullet out of the cartridge and into the barrel, but not enough force
gotcha.
to get it to leave the entire barrel.
Yeah.
So people will hear the bang, and all it is the primer. It's a noticeable difference. When you're used to shooting handguns, you can identify a squib immediately because it sounds like someone's shooting a paintball gun almost.
Yeah.
It's a pop, but it's much quieter and really short. And that's very, very dangerous. Sometimes you get lucky, and it is just enough force to get the bullet out of the barrel. But a lot of the time is that bullet is stuck in the barrel, and if you fire again, you are at a seriously high chance of that gun blowing up.
Yeah, because there was a picture, like, there was like 4 rounds.
It was a revolver, yeah.
Yeah, just stuck back to back.
In fact, one of my instructors had that issue. Some guy brought in a .357 revolver, 5-inch barrel, and told him he shot an entire cylinder at a piece of cardboard like 10 yards away and didn't even hit the cardboard. So he said, okay, we'll look at it. And when he brought it to the school, it was loaded. A whole new cylinder, 5 more rounds in there. Okay?
Pro tip, but when you bring your gun to a gunsmith, please unload it.
When you bring it into any shop, if you're not concealed carrying that handgun, please have it unloaded. I can't even...
Especially a school.
I don't know how many... right? I don't know how many times... Oh, I checked it. It's unloaded. And then you open the action and a live round comes out. It's like, you took the magazine out. Anyway, so he brings it in loaded. They unload the cylinder, look in the barrel, and sure enough, there's bullets. They ended up cutting the barrel off. There was 5 rounds. He fired. I don't know how the gun didn't blow up. Kudos to, I believe it was a Smith & Wesson revolver. Kudos to them. That thing should have blown up.
Is it mainly revolvers that it happens with?
No.
Okay.
I mean, it just so happened that that's 2 stories that line up. It's actually a little safer for revolvers for a squib load to happen because the reason you're risking something blowing up is because when you're firing into a blocked barrel, the gas has to go somewhere.
Right.
So it tends to want to go rearward, which could blow up your handgun or your rifle or whatever it is. Well, when it's a revolver, there's actually a gap in between the cylinder and the barrel.
Space in there.
And that allows the gases to escape, as opposed to just blowing up.
Yeah.
So like I said, kudos to Smith & Wesson. 5 rounds. I mean, I would have thought that thing would blow up just from the force of getting, whatever. But either way, So that's a squib load. What was the beginning of this conversation, though? Because I don't remember at this point. Oh, double action, being able to do follow-up shots.
Yes.
Okay. So,
I'm so sorry.
Good Lord. The proof that striker-fired handguns, most of them, are single action only is that you pull the trigger once. If the gun doesn't go boom, you can't just pull the trigger again. You have to recock the handgun. So, let's see. Striker-fired handguns often don't have external safeties. Most of them have a trigger safety, which you can see on this CZ, and that is considered external, but is something people don't consider a safety.
There's one on mechanic.
Mm-hmm. Oh, that's another one we have. I forgot about that. People just don't think that if people tend to think if I don't have to actuate it with my thumb, specifically, it's not a safety. But the trigger has a safety. Most striker-fired handguns have 2 to 3 internal safeties. Sometimes that's including the trigger safety. Sometimes that's not including the trigger safety.
Some have that, like the
grip safety.
Grip, yeah, thank you.
Yep. The 1911 has that, and that's a hammer-fired gun. But the Smith & Wesson 380 EZ has a grip safety. So do
I did not know that.
The XD, Springfield XDs, the Croatia XDs. There's all different kinds of safeties, but a lot of the time striker-fired handguns don't have safeties. A lot of FUDs like to complain about that. I think they should have better trigger discipline and know how to use their firearms correctly. But, that's just some millennial talking, I guess. What do I know? I've never once had an ND or an AD, so...
Me neither.
That's crazy, right?
Right? Didn't somebody at one point say, if you haven't, you're not handling your firearm enough?
Yes.
That doesn't make any sense.
I think it was Mr. Guns and Gear shared this post. Maybe I could be wrong, but there was this post about some guy saying if you haven't had an ND, you're clearly not training enough, and it's like, what kind of training are you doing, dude? Are you just training how to really screw up someone's day? I can't, man.
That's how you damage your own property.
You kill yourself.
Kill somebody else.
Kill someone else.
Shoot yourself in the leg.
You're not training enough, Caroline.
No, clearly not.
You haven't had an ND.
I have not.
Man, unprofessional. How many times can I call her unprofessional today?
He said, let's knock on wood about the ND.
I know, right? I said it, so now God's
it's going to happen.
God's like, oh, really? I'm just going to make your gun, just not work one day. I'm going to go install a trigger in my gun one day, and it's going to be like, you missed one little pin. You die now. But that's why we fired the other rules, such as pointing in safe directions. So even if you do have an ND, it's safe. Well, it's not safe, but it's in a safe direction.
It's not going to kill anybody.
It's not going to kill anyone. Man, knock on something, because we're saying a lot of
We've got
outlandish
drywall.
things here.
Well, there's
wood trim right beside you.
There's wood trim.
Okay. You chose the drywall before you chose the wooden trim.
Well, I forgot the trim was there.
I'm about to ban you from today's episode.
That's fine.
You're going to take another nap, aren't
I
you?
can go take another nap.
All right. I went over the safeties. I went over how the striker-fired handgun works. So yeah, these things are generally very, very safe handguns, very reliable handguns now. The technology's come a long way. Striker-fired guns are now just as, if not more popular than hammer-fired guns. In 2021, a lot of 20s, we're looking good on both ends. So what are the advantages and disadvantages of both? Off the top of your head, Caroline, can you think of any advantages or disadvantages of the two different types of systems? Or 3 if you count single action being its own thing and DASA being its own thing, and then striker. Just as a new person, do you think if there's anything that would be considered an advantage or maybe a disadvantage?
I don't really see any having advantages over each other, but I think with a double action, it's so much harder to pull that trigger back.
Oh, of course.
On that first double action. Like if you're in a high stress situation,
yes,
you could pull it back and get that resistance and then think something's wrong and then it's a whole thing,
or just miss your targeting. So that's actually a really good point. It's one of the things I wrote down here. I mentioned earlier that you could carry the handgun in double action mode only as your safety. Some people will chamber the round. Let's just take the USP 9mm compact here. Some people will load it and chamber it and then decock it down to double action only and just use the trigger itself as a safety because it's so heavy, it's literally almost impossible for you to pull it on accident.
It's hard to pull back.
It's almost impossible for you to just accidentally pull a double action trigger like the USP. It's hefty. The issue with that is if you needed to pull that handgun in a stressful situation, those of you who have trained in stressful situations understand that adrenaline really makes your fine motor skills disappear.
It's non-existent.
Just non-existent. So trying to have a smooth and consistent trigger pull on a double action trigger that you may not have trained a lot on.
Especially the double action trigger pull itself. Like,
yeah. So, well, let me finish this because there's something else I want to say about double action trigger pulls. If you aren't training on your double action trigger pull, I can almost guarantee you're going to miss your first shot. Now, for the rest of the magazine, you're in a single action mode. Maybe you've trained on that one as opposed to double action. And that's great, but maybe that first shot's really important. You know what I mean? So that's actually a disadvantage in my viewpoint. Now, if you're training on that gun and you're training on your double action trigger pull, which a lot of people do, then you're fine. It's not a disadvantage, but it's a disadvantage if you're not going to train.
It's that muscle memory that knows that first shot is going to be a lot harder. But I mean, if you go to the range, you put a new magazine in,
and you cock it and just shoot the magazine, you never even try your double action. I can tell you right now, if none of you have ever shot the USP's double action trigger pull, it's not the heaviest in the world, but it's about 12 pounds.
Yeah, it's not super heavy, but like when we first got it, I was surprised.
I know it's about 12 pounds because I've looked at even H&K's own marketing information, and the single action is about 6 pounds, maybe 5. I could be remembering incorrectly, but I remember the double action trigger pull being advertised as around 12 pounds, and I've got a trigger pull gauge. We could go test it out.
Yeah.
And I think their law enforcement edition, so some of their handguns are double action only. They have no single action because some places think police should only have double action triggers. That way they don't fire too many bullets. Dude, it's training. Just stop. Stop being so stupid. These states are so stupid. Just train more. Anyways, their law enforcement triggers are like 8-pound double action. So they're lighter, but they're more consistent, and it's still 8 pounds. It's still super heavy. But I know people who shoot double action revolvers all the time with like 8-pound trigger pulls, and they can stack holes. Yeah. So that's great, but it just comes in a manual of arms. If you don't train with your double action trigger and you carry it as in double action as your safety, you are doing a disservice to yourself, and that is 100% a disadvantage. So what are some other advantages / disadvantages? One of the advantages for striker-fired handguns is that most striker-fired handguns have less exposed parts, and a lot of the exposed parts are actually very slim. And that's just a trend of, let's be honest, Glock started this trend, and it's been kind of the standard to get less and less exposed parts, slimmer and slimmer exposed parts.
I mean, that's good.
For less things to snag on.
Right.
For concealed carry, you don't want these things to snag. For like a duty handgun, it's not as much of a big deal because you're in a holster,
right?
An external holster rather than under the clothing. And for competition, it's not a big deal because you want your slide catch to be really easy to manipulate. You want your safeties to be easy to manipulate. Maybe your mag releases.
Yeah, and that's not going to be under anything either.
Exactly.
Like that's going to be out.
But I mean, you look at a Glock or my CZ, everything on there is very slim, and there's less sharp edges for things to snag onto. But you look at the 1911. You got a beaver tail, you've got an exposed hammer, you've got, and this one has a rail, not a huge deal, but I mean, these are all these hard corners are things that can snag clothing. And companies like SIG and a couple other companies have been pushing like specific models that are even more rounded off to make less snag points.
The parts that aren't exposed are pretty rounded.
Yes, no. It's not the best example of hard corners, but SIG makes the 365 and other handguns with their SAS package, which is the SIG anti-snag. And it comes with fantastic features like a slide release or slide catch that is literally impossible to use. It also comes with iron sight. Well, it's not even iron sights anymore. It's this weird, I don't know what it's made out of. It's this sight that's set in the rear of the slide that is also almost impossible to use. They went too hard with the anti-snag. Like you literally, the only way to actually have the slide locked back, and then, well, the only way to drop the slide with it being locked back is to have a loaded magazine in it and rack it.
Yeah.
You can't get your thumb on the slide release. That's too far. Okay.
Yeah.
But people are really marketing towards that whole less things to catch on clothing, or
I can't use the slide release. It's on my Smith & Wesson.
The Smith & Wesson slide releases have been very stout. I can modify that. I don't know why I haven't yet. I'll take it to the garage and fix that.
I mean,
No problem.
Yeah, I mean, it hasn't really been like the biggest deal, but like if I pull the slide back and it's fine, but like when the slide is resting on that slide release,
Yeah.
it's just it's.
I mean, I think you had the
do
same.
It if I'm,
when we first started shooting the CZ, you had the same issue, but it broke in really well.
Yeah.
It broke in really
Because
well.
I thought that one would break in, and it did not.
No, the CZs, the P10 series was even the brand new ones that I got my hands on, with no magazine in them, so it's just resting on the slide release. They are very hard. I had trouble selling them back in the day. I used to work at a gun shop, and I would sell those things, and I'd have to actually take my own CZ P10C out and show it to them and say, look, it wears in. Trust me, it's not that stout. Like, try mine. But they're stout.
Yeah.
And we can fix yours. That's no problem. So that's one of the advantages of a lot of striker-fired handguns. Now, it's not just striker-fired handguns. I'm just using that as an example of most striker-fired handguns are very, let's just say, low profile externally, right? Very good for concealed carrying. We're going to move over to single-action handguns, like 1911s. An advantage for them is they tend to have better triggers out of the box. Just less moving parts.
Yeah.
Less requirements for things to work. And when there's less moving parts and it's more simple, it's less janky, less junky, less gritty.
Yeah.
Some of the best triggers out of the box on the market, even at the cheap end, are 1911s. The 1911 has an extremely simple trigger, which basically just moves rearward, like literally rearward inside of the trigger actually goes around the magazine in the grip.
So it's the ones that go straight back instead of
it goes straight back.
It.
Internally even, it goes straight back.
Yeah.
Pushes on a leaf spring of sorts, which slips off of a sear. And the sear drops the hammer.
That?
No. Your Canic has a more straight trigger, but it still has the striker fire linkage.
Okay, yeah.
I mean, the entire trigger system just moves rearward. A leaf spring moves when it gets pushed on by the trigger, and then it slips off of a friction point on the sear, which drops the hammer. I mean, it's really simple.
Yeah.
It's really simple. So even your Remington R1s, which are really cheap 1911s, your entry point 1911s for a lot of people, it's something you can build on. They have fantastic triggers out of the box because it's single action only. It's so easy to keep smooth. When you get into more moving parts and more, let's just say, linkage systems, you have to make sure they're safe. So you have to keep things at a certain weight or some resistance, and you tend to make harder to pull triggers. And manufacturers like to keep their triggers for carry around. They'll say like 3 to 4.5 pounds, but in reality, it's often 4 to 6 pounds for a carry trigger. So single actions tend to have better triggers. So now, don't get me wrong, there are tons of trainers out there who shoot stock Glocks all the time, and if you've ever shot a Glock, you know the triggers are absolute trash, like just awful, just abysmal. But it all comes down to manual of arms. Have you trained with your trigger? Get some trigger time in, you'll be fine. Learn the fundamentals of marksmanship. Learn how to pull a trigger smoothly and consistently, and you'll be fine. But it is an advantage in most single action handguns. One of the things we mentioned earlier was that double action handguns have follow-up shot capabilities, where if the gun doesn't go bang when you drop the hammer, you can pull it again. I don't see this as an advantage, but I will bring it up as such because in any situation, whether you're training at the range or whether you're in a stressful situation, if you pull the trigger and the hammer drops and nothing happens, the first thing you should do is clear that malfunction.
Yeah.
You rack that slide back, get a new round in the chamber. You don't sit there and keep pulling the trigger and hoping it goes bang.
Yeah.
It's good for like 22 revolvers where maybe you're using some junky 22 ammo and the first time you hit it, it doesn't go bang. Well, you can just keep pulling the trigger till it goes bang. Like, okay, not a big deal if you're at the range.
Yeah.
But I would not consider follow-up shot capabilities a real advantage when it's not what you should be doing.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But I will still state it as an advantage because some people just really believe that being able to pull the trigger multiple times until the round goes bang is an advantage. You can believe so. Take it as you will. But your manual of arms should be to clear the malfunction.
Yeah.
That's why having a striker fire gun or even the 1911 in a single action doesn't bother me. one of the advantages for double action is that it can act as the safety, which, like I said, that can be taken either way.
Mm-hmm.
You know, if you train with your double action trigger and you're fine just using that as a safety, first shot double action, everything, that's fine. I carried the USP cocked and locked. Just like I've carried the 1911 before, I carried it chambered, safety on, and cocked, so single action only. Double action trigger is awful.
Mm-hmm.
It's just that trigger is abysmal, and they don't make from what I could tell, they don't make a upgraded trigger for the compact specifically. You have to modify the regular trigger, not the stock trigger, but like you can buy a USP upgraded trigger and then modify it to fit the compacts properly. Never fiddled with it. I haven't carried that thing in years. It was my very first carry handgun was a USP 9 compact. Well, that's not true. Let me reframe that. That's the first ever new carry gun I bought. I bought used ones before that, but that was the very first new handgun I ever bought. I guess one other advantage would be that striker-fired handguns often don't have external safeties, which is one less thing for you to have to think about doing before you pull the trigger.
Yeah.
One thing we talk about with manual of arms is you need to train until these things become muscle memory. And with the USP and with the 1911, I have trained a lot on drawing the handgun from the holster, and before I have the handgun's iron sights lined up, the safety's already off. Yeah. And with 1911s, it's really easy because you can train yourself to actually place your thumb on the safety as you're pulling it out, and safety off, and just leave your thumb there, and use that safety as a ramp, like for leverage. You can get leverage on that safety. But that's if you're not willing to train to do that, which unfortunately I know this hurts for some people to hear, but almost all the women I've ever met that carry like in their purse, they carry a gun with a manual safety on it, and they refuse to practice drawing and taking the safety off, and it worries me because I mean I know a lot of women who just they feel really good about having a gun in their purse, and I'm like, well, what happens if someone steals your gun? They're like, well, I've got my gun. I'm like, but what if they steal your purse?
What happens if somebody steals your purse? Yeah. Because a lot of times, like, you're carrying your purse, like, it's in your little arm crease. Like,
yeah, and they're like, oh, well, I carry it like this in my arm crease, so it's hard to steal. I'm like, woman, if I wanted to yank that out of your arms, there's literally nothing you could physically do to stop me. Now, if you shot me, sure, but I really am. I'm so against purse carry. It's so unsafe. You get your purse stolen, there goes your gun, too. I mean...
There was that one story, that girl... I don't know, she was a waitress or something.
Oh yeah, she had her hand.
So it was one of the carry purses. So it's like it's in its own thing in the back of it. Yeah. So she was walking, she was holding her purse like on her shoulder, and she had her hand in there holding it.
That's one of the exemptions I'll say. If you're willing to walk around with your hand on your gun in the purse at all times, then sure. I mean, I don't see that realistically being a consistent
thing. Purses are for lipstick. Dean Adams sponsor, please.
Yeah. Dean Adams, I will fight for that sponsorship. Dean Adams is where you need to be looking if you're a female and you want to conceal carry. Dean Adams is the best options.
It's pricey, but it's
definitely pricey.
100% worth it.
But it's the first female carry clothing option that I've ever seen that I personally think is really good quality. I'm just against purses in general, not just for carrying. These giant bags you just like to lug around.
Shove receipts in them. That's all.
I do. I just shove. That's how often you carry purses now.
Not often.
It worked, didn't it? I just shoved all my receipts in her purses, and she stopped carrying them. It worked.
I would have like my wallet and like one or two other things, and just half full of receipts.
Yep. It worked though. She doesn't carry a purse anymore. But anyways, if you're not willing to really practice using this external safety, then it's going to be on you when you pull your gun in a stressful situation. Forget there's a safety, start pulling the trigger, and nothing happens, right? So striker-fired handguns that often don't have external safeties. There are exceptions. You can get the P365 with a safety. I believe you could get a 320 model with the safety, which I think is the M17.
When I practice drawing, I hit the safety first.
Yeah,
it's right. Like it's right.
If you're willing to do that, it's fine. But if you're not willing to actually get that muscle memory and manual of arms to pull the safety off, then striker-fired handguns can be a little better for you. Although you still should practice all your manual of arms. But striker-fired handguns having the safety built into the trigger, and then internally for like drop safeties and all that stuff, all you have to do is point and shoot. Mm-hmm. And this is something that I really think should be preached more to women who are less interested. I don't blame women for not being super interested in handguns. Like, I don't blame you for that. But I do blame you for wanting to conceal carry to protect yourself and not being willing to practice That way you can actually defend yourself or your family or your kids or whatever it may be. If you're going to try to be a responsible adult and you want to feel safe, you should be a responsible adult.
Yeah.
And that's something that I think is great about striker fired handguns.
A lot more women have been getting into firearms recently.
I agree.
Within the past few years,
Yes,
especially in this area.
Especially with all the new handgun owners in the country right now in the past year. A lot of those, like single moms, they should definitely be concealed carrying.
Or just moms in general.
All moms, but you know what I mean? Like single moms with no guy in the house that's into guns and wants to train and practice and protect his family. With none of that, you should be doing it.
Or a mom who has a guy in the house that doesn't want to.
Yeah, that's true too. That happens. Got your soy boys. They're scared of the guns. They bad. Mm-hmm. A lot of times you'll hear FUDs telling their wives, "Well, I just want you to have this 38 special revolver next to you so you can just point and shoot." And it's like, okay, but if you believe that, why not get her a Glock or a CZ or
and let her train?
You get more than 5 rounds. You've got 17 rounds in my case, or 16 rounds in my case, and you still just have to point and shoot. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? Like FUDs genuinely anger me. For those of you who don't know, we call any supposed firearm enthusiast. Usually, it's just these hunters who don't really believe in AR-15s and AR-10s, and they just need the bolt actions and a good revolver. They tend to think that their women, as in their daughters or their wives, are literally incapable of using handguns properly. And
I've seen like 5-year-olds handle handguns better than me. Like,
yeah, it's infuriating. If you're a female and you want to get into shooting and into protection of yourself or maybe those around you, do not wait for somebody. Don't. Go out and seek the help. Go to a range.
Our sheriff is big on that.
Our sheriff is huge on women concealed carrying, although he's kind of a FUD too. Kind of a FUD. I mean, he's got this weird. He recommended like this real. It was a cheap revolver. I guess maybe he was just trying to appeal to everyone who could have basically always afford it.
I mean, if he's saying, "Ladies, go buy a gun."
Yeah. No, I'm with him. But yeah, if you're looking into starting to carry, you need to go seek out someone to help you. Find the information, have someone teach you the safety, the fundamentals. Help. I will help any of my female friends find a gun that would work for them to carry. I would help any of them try to find the right way to carry options. I have spent so much money on my own ammo teaching girls how to shoot. Mm-hmm. That's why I'm almost out of ammo, and it's too late to restock. I think we covered all the pros and cons that I really want to talk about. There are others. They're just so nitpicky that it's not relevant to this conversation. Mm-hmm. This conversation is to be simple, give you the basics of the differences of what these guns do, how they work, and what you should know to get the jumping off point, right?
Right.
So the question comes down to what's best for you. You being the viewer, the listener. If you're diehard on a purse carry, you might want to go with an external safety because you get your lipstick. If you're not using a holster in your purse, which some women don't.
Well, they make purses specifically for concealed carry that have a pocket.
Yes.
Just like an external pocket just for the gun.
Yes, but how many grandmas have you seen walking around with a burst of 380 Thunder just chilling in their purse?
That's true.
In no pocket, just jumbling around.
Yeah.
If you're going to be really irresponsible and do that, at least get a gun with a manual safety. I just don't recommend doing that at all. If you're going to do a purse, get one with a pocket for a handgun.
Because then you got to rifle around in your purse trying to find it.
Man, it's just, what happens when your lipstick just rolls into that trigger well, bang. Mm-hmm. It depends on you. It depends on your situation and your options. The best thing for you to do is to get your hands on multiple handgun models and just see what works best for you. Like, just touch them.
I did. That's why it took a while for me to find my concealed carry, because I could not find one that
she has tiny hands.
Was comfortable enough to carry.
She has little baby hands, and no matter what handgun I handed her, she couldn't reach all the controls.
That was my big thing. Like, I don't want to have to reposition.
Yep.
To drop the magazine,
or to
do
drop
the
slide.
safety,
Yeah.
or to drop the slide.
Yep.
Like,
but the Smith & Wesson M&P Shield Performance Center Edition was the perfect size.
Yeah.
She could reach all the controls on it with her tiny little baby hands. So it works. So that's what's important, is getting your hands on these different guns. Make sure you can work the handgun. Hand sizes are different. Preferences are different. preferred types of safeties are different. Some people just like a grip safety. Some people like just having the trigger safety.
I like the external safety.
Some people, the thumb safety.
Yeah, I like the thumb safety.
And some people like that. I don't really care.
It's really responsive, and I like that I know
that it's off.
Yeah,
like
when I take it off. When I take it off, I know it's off.
Yeah. Yeah, and my issue is I don't really care about safeties, as in, like, I don't care what kind of safety it has on it, as long as it works.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, I can train anything. The only safeties I don't like are the Springfield XDs grip safeties. Mm-hmm. They cut my hand. And people are like, well, you're not gripping it high enough. Actually, I'm gripping it as high as humanly possible, and that's why it cuts my hand open. The webbing in between my thumb and my index finger, every time I shoot an XD, after a magazine or two, my hand is bleeding. Mm-hmm. That's just, and it's because there's a gap in the top of the beaver tail. It's not really a beaver tail, but I'm going to call it a beaver tail. That's a beaver tail right there. But in the top of the grip curve going up, there's a gap in between the polymer frame and the grip safety. And my skin,
the safety comes down past.
It's a real thin piece of material. I can't remember if it's polymer or if it's metal, but it sticks out of the grip. Mm-hmm. And it's not as long as the 1911 grip safeties, and it's real thin. So there's this itty bitty gap in between that safety itself and then the polymer frame. And I'm gripping the handgun so high and so tight that my skin gets pushed into that hole. Yeah. And over time, overshooting, it just splits my hand wide open. And I had so many customers like, well, that's BS because it's never happened to me. I was like, I'm not saying it can or will or always will. Yeah. I'm just telling you that's what happens to me, and that's why I don't like it. And I showed him, I was like, watch. I gripped the gun really high, got a good firm grip on it, and as I pulled my hand away, it pulled my skin with it. And I was like, boom, first try right there. Like, that's why I don't like it. I had one. I bought it for carry, hated it. That's actually been the last gun that I've sold in the past 4 years is that one. I don't sell guns anymore, like my own personal guns. I keep everything except for that XD. Yeah. That's the only safety that I don't like. I don't mind the 1911 safety. I don't mind the USP safety, and I don't mind not having a thumb safety with the CZ. I don't care.
I just like really responsive safety.
And that's fine. It just comes down to manual of arms and what you prefer. So, I mean,
I don't mind any of the other ones. Yeah. But, like, for my carry, I would prefer a really responsive.
And that one's definitely responsive. When you pull it down, you've got a real positive feedback. Some people like...
solid click.
Ooh, sorry. Some people like carrying the Micro 9 Kimber, which is like a small single stack 9mm 1911. It's not exactly, but that's basically what it is. Others carry a 10mm Glock and everything in between. I've actually met a guy who carried a 50 caliber Desert Eagle during the winter. Every winter he carried a 50 caliber. EDC? That was his EDC.
That's fantastic.
I thought he was kidding because he was concealing it so well. Yeah. I legitimately thought he was kidding, and he pulled his vest open. I was like, holy crap, there it is. Nice, man. Good for you. Whatever you want.
Yeah, that's great.
Now, I would never do that. But, no. I mean, everything is different for everyone. So what you can do is to go to a range, and if they allow rentals, rent as many as you can afford to rent that you think are options for you to conceal carry. Yeah. That are in your price range that you want to shoot first to make sure. If you can't afford to go to the range and shoot, because it is super expensive right now with ammo being $1 billion around. That's an exaggeration, but not that far of an exaggeration. Go to a friend. If you have a friend that owns lots of guns, go to them. I'm sure they would love to help you out.
If you paid for ammo.
If you pay for it, especially now. Yeah. I used to not care. Now you have to pay for ammo. I can't afford to do it anymore.
Because it used to not be so expensive.
But I mean, gun users want the gun community to grow and expand, and we want more.
Safely.
Safely, exactly. And that's the big thing. We're all really happy to teach you the safe way to do things, because the more knowledgeable you are and the safer you are, the better the gun community is for it. Mm-hmm. So it's only a positive net gain, and not only just the gun community for selfish reasons, but also the safety of your community. Yeah. I mean, not everyone in this neighborhood, but a lot of people in my neighborhood are like, hey, Josh, can you watch our house? I'm like, man, why'd I have to tell them all that I like safety and, being secure in my own house? But yeah, so you need to look at these to yourself, but you also, seek the help. Do not be afraid to ask for help from anyone who's knowledgeable. If you're a new handgun user or a new CWP user, which is Concealed Weapons Permit.
Each state it's different.
Some states it's a CCW, some it's a CWP. But going out and buying your first handgun or buying the first handgun that somebody recommends to you is not the right way. I can recommend something. It may not work for you because we're all different. So make sure you seek out help and go and physically touch everything, and do not be afraid to touch these guns. Like, look, I need to touch it. Now touch it safely, but touch them.
Because I mean, like gun stores, like that's what they do. Like that's why
all these guys getting paid $8 an hour to lie through their teeth to you. Certain big box stores that I will not name for now. I might call them out later. Their only job is to hand you guns.
Yeah.
And
they're not trained on like information about
maybe
them at
sell
all.
them. Just go get your hands on them, okay? It's really important for you to get something that you're comfortable with, because that's what's important. You have to be comfortable with your handgun that you
do
carry.
research before you go.
Yes, of course.
Because they'll
try to sell you on all kinds of stuff.
Yeah, and a lot of times they don't know what they're talking about.
Of course, yes. Oh man, there's one specific company that only hires people who seem to know nothing about guns.
Yeah.
It's really weird.
There was the one guy that we had that...
Oh, I meant the company across the street
okay.
from that company.
Okay.
Yeah. They seem to only hire people who don't know what they're talking about, and it baffles me. I've never met a single person.
That was the one that hung up on me, right?
Yes.
Because I asked
yes.
an actual question. Like,
she asked them, do you guys have the CZ P10C? And they were like, the what? The CZ P10C. He's like, who makes it? And she's like, CZ.
And they hung up.
This company, I swear on my life, seems to
and it's
just...
a big company.
Yes, it's a huge company. They just seem to only want to hire people at the retail counter that don't know anything about guns. No. And it genuinely baffles me. But I'm sure that's why their turnover rate's outrageous.
Oh, yeah. No, but it was just...
But yeah, so...
And it was right when it came out, too. Like, it was a...
Before people immediately figure out who we're talking about, let's close up.
Just coming out.
Let's end this, okay, before we get down the rabbit hole of what company this is. Being comfortable with your handgun is important. The handgun is a tool, just like all firearms. They are simply a tool. And if you do not know how to properly use that tool, then the tool is worth nothing. Because you have to know how to use the tool to use it effectively. Is it raining?
No, I think that's your laptop.
Oh, my laptop is getting loud and spicy. She's getting hot. We are streaming and recording and watching the stream. She's doing her best, guys. So that's all I got for everyone. If you're watched on YouTube or if you're watching on the stream, thank you guys so much for watching. I really appreciate it. Please, please, please remember to subscribe, comment with any fun ideas you've got for episodes, share it with your friends, anybody who likes handguns, or anybody you might want to recommend this to if they're just now getting into handguns and you'd like to recommend this as a basic information dump on the different types of handguns. I'd really, really appreciate it. It would help us out a lot.
Or if you're in upstate South Carolina and you need some work done.
Yep, look up TBR Gunworks. I'm a licensed gunsmith, so check me out on tbrgunworks.com. I won't go any more detail on this right now because the way we operate is kind of weird. But hit the like button on YouTube. If you're on the podcast sites, leave a review if possible. Like I said, share with your friends. I believe Amazon and Google will allow you to leave a review if you like it. I really, really appreciate it. That's the biggest thing you can do to help podcasts is to leave a review. That's bigger than downloads. It's bigger than shares. Like the reviews for podcasts specifically are the most important thing. And we would really, really greatly appreciate it. Find us on Instagram at TBR Gunworks. Find us on Facebook at TBR Gunworks. Find us online for
just the interwebs.
The interwebs at TBR Gunworks. I made it pretty simple for everyone. It's all the same. And we would also greatly appreciate, just check out the website. I've left some really funny things on my website that I thought would really make like your average gun guy laugh.
Oh, I've got a friend who has it bookmarked. So like every time he just needs a chuckle, he checks the website and just...
Yeah, I thought it was funny.
Then closes, yeah.
Yeah, if you go to tbrgunworks.com, the first thing that I think is really funny is the Our Team page.
That's what he's got pulled up.
It's pretty funny. So thank you guys so much for watching / listening. I didn't mess up this time.
You did not.
We really, really
say
appreciate
words.
it. I can do words. It's almost like English is my first language.
Yeah.
And only language.
And only.
Well, I've got like 1 1/17 of a language.
I wouldn't even say 1/17.
Really?
You've got a few phrases.
You're going to do me like that?
I am.
I'm offended and hurt. I didn't record. Nice.
What?
Nothing. I just messed up big time. No big deal. Big oof.
Big oof.
Big oof. Thanks for watching. I'm sad now. I only streamed it.
Oh, no.
This is going to be a real fun attempt to try to fix that.
Oh.
Yeah. Well, hopefully I'll find a way to put this on the podcast sites, guys. Thank you so much for listening. Or I guess just watching at this point.
Watching.
Oh, man. Y'all have a safe week. Hope to see you guys next Sunday at 6:30 on YouTube, live streaming. Be safe.
And recording.
Trust the Second Amendment. And we'll see